Welcome, dear viewers. Sit back, relax, and sip your coffee.
My name's Ethan Rourke. I've been driving long-haul deliveries for about 4 years now. Just me, the road, and whatever stale podcast episode one hadn't listened to yet. Most of my routes are uneventful, boring even, but the check clears and I get to keep my own hours. This particular job was meant to be routine. A drop-off of bulk supplies to a convenience store tucked way up in rural Pennsylvania. The town's name didn't even sound real when I first saw it, Breckenridge Hollow. I was behind schedule because of a pile-up on I-84, and when I finally pulled into a roadside gas station, the sun was already starting to slip behind the hills. I figured I'd grab a coffee, top off the tank, and maybe ask for directions. What I got was a warning dressed as advice. The man behind the counter had deep-set eyes and a smile that never quite reached them. When I told him I was headed to Breckenridge Hollow, his expression changed. "You're better off taking Hollow Creek Road," he said slowly, pointing out the window to a dirt path between two trees. "Your GPS won't show it, but it'll cut 20 minutes off your trip." I must have looked skeptical because he added, "Don't worry, locals use it all the time. Just, don't stop for anything once you're in." I let out a small chuckle. "What, is that part of some local ghost story?" He didn't smile back. "You ask too many questions on Hollow Creek, it's not answers you get, it's what's waiting." That should have been my cue to leave. But I was tired. Running late. I shrugged it off and drove onto the path. At first it wasn't so bad. Trees hugged the road tightly, but my headlights cut through the dusk well enough. Gravel crunched under my tires. A rabbit darted across the road. Totally normal. Until I hit the fog. Thick, white, and sudden, it rolled in like someone had flipped a switch. 1 second clear. The next, I couldn't see 5 feet in front of me. I slowed to a crawl. Every instinct screamed to turn around, but the road was too narrow to back up without risking going off the edge. Then I saw something, or someone, standing at the tree line. A figure. Just still. Watching. No movement. No detail. I blinked, wiped the inside of my windshield, and it was gone. That should have been the moment I turned back. But instead I kept going, gripping the wheel tighter than I ever had. After another mile, the fog thinned and I found myself coasting downhill toward what looked like the edge of a small town. A wooden sign creaked in the wind, half covered in ivy. "Welcome to Breckenridge Hollow, EST 1821. I pulled into the lot behind the store I was delivering to, Mallory's General Supply, and shut off the engine. My hands were shaking, though I told myself it was just the fog. Just road nerves. Nothing more. The store looked off. Old but not in a quaint way. The wood siding was gray and splintered, and the lights inside flickered inconsistently. As I approached the door, I noticed something carved into the wooden frame, long gouges like scratches. The air smelled of cedar, old paper, and something metallic. Blood. I didn't want to guess. Inside, the place was nearly silent. A bell above the door gave a weak ding as I stepped in. Behind the counter sat a woman in her late 40s, stringy brown hair tied back, face pale and tight with fatigue. "You're the delivery man," she said, not asked. More like a statement of disappointment. Yeah. Supplies for Mallory's. Scheduled drop-off?" She looked past me toward the foggy road, then back again. "You took Hollow Creek, didn't you?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, the guy at the gas station said it'd be quicker." Her lips tightened. "Next time you take the long way. If there is a next time." I unloaded the boxes as fast as I could, heart racing even though I couldn't put a finger on why. The whole town felt wrong. So, like it was waiting for something. I tried to make small talk, something, anything, to shake the unease. "What's the deal with the fog out there?" She glanced up. "It's always like that. Especially when it gets close." She ignored me, signing the manifest and muttering, "You should leave before nightfall." Back in my truck, I tried to shake it all off. I plugged the GPS in and saw nothing. No roads. No signal. Just a blank grid with a pulsing dot. Me. I cursed under my breath. "I just drive back the way I came, get out of this weird place and never come back." But the road out was gone. No, I don't mean hard to see. I mean gone. Where the dirt road had been, there was now nothing but trees. Thick, ancient ones, gnarled roots and twisted branches where a road had been not an hour before. I put the truck in reverse and backed up until I was near the store again. I ran inside, heart pounding. "The road's gone," I gasped. It was right there. The woman behind the counter didn't look surprised. "You weren't supposed to take that road. Now you're part of it." "Part of what?" That's when she finally said it. The name. The Hollowman. She explained it like she was reading from a script burned into her memory. He's old. Older than this town. Older than the soil itself. No one knows what he is, ghost, demon, something worse. But he lives in the woods. In the fog. Feeds on memory, identity. You take the road and he sees you, and then he waits. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because the alternative meant accepting something I wasn't ready for. This is insane. I'm not playing into some folk tale. There has to be another road out. There isn't, she said flatly. Not until sunrise. And even then. She trailed off, her eyes unfocused. Even then he doesn't always let go. That night, I parked in the lot and locked every door, gripping the steering wheel like it could save me. The fog crept back in just after sunset. Thicker this time. Heavier. At 1:13 a.m. something tapped on my window. I didn't look. I didn't breathe. It tapped again. 3 times. Soft. Almost polite. Then it whispered my name. Not shouted. Not groaned. Whispered. And not just Ethan. It used my middle name. My mother's nickname for me. The one no one else knew. My vision blurred. My heart hammered. I turned to look just once. There was no face. Just a void. A silhouette made of fog, tall and stretched like the outline of a man caught between dimensions. It didn't move. It didn't knock again. Just watched. And then it was gone. Morning never came. The sky turned gray, then dim, then gray again. Time slowed. Or maybe it stopped. I don't know how long I've been here. The townsfolk won't speak to me anymore. Some just stare. Others avoid me entirely. But I know this much. The Hollowman saw me. And once he sees you, he never looks away. Morning never came. Not a real one anyway. The sky above Brackenridge Hollow had settled into a dull, overcast haze, as if the sun had given up on shining over this place. My truck's clock ticked forward, 7:14 a.m., 8:05 a.m., but it didn't feel like morning. It didn't feel like time at all. I hadn't slept. Not after what I saw. That thing. That Hollowman. Its silhouette still lingered in my mind's eye, its void-like body, the fog writhing around it, and most of all, the whisper. It knew me. Knew who I was. What I was. I wasn't just a name on a manifest anymore. I was prey. I stepped out of the truck, half expecting to see the road reappear, the fog lift, the nightmare end. It didn't. The road behind the store was still swallowed by trees that hadn't been there yesterday. The forest looked ancient, the kind of woods where light didn't belong. The kind of place where stories were buried. Brackenridge Hollow was awake though. Or at least pretending to be. The townsfolk moved stiffly through their routines like actors in a school play, opening shops, sweeping porches, sipping coffee on creaky stoops. But their eyes, no one met mine. Not anymore. The woman at the general store, Mallory, I learned, was outside when I returned. You need to talk to Father Marin, she said without turning to me. Father? Like a priest? She nodded once. He tends the chapel on the hill. He knows the old things. Knows how to delay them. Delay them? The Hollowman, she said. And the others. The forest isn't just trees. I walked the gravel path up the hill, past rotting fences and rusted-out pickup trucks that hadn't moved in decades. At the top stood a small wooden chapel with crooked shutters and a steeple that listed slightly to one side. A graveyard sprawled behind it, most of the headstones eroded down to smooth stone. The front door creaked open before I could knock. Come in, came a voice like wind through dry leaves. Father Marin looked more like a scarecrow than a priest, thin and stooped, his cassock draped loosely over bony limbs. His skin was pale and papery, as if the blood inside him had learned to hide. You've seen it, he said, not asking. That's why the air tastes like rot. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. He motioned to a pew and I sat, the old wood groaning beneath me. You walked Hollow Creek Road, he continued. That path is a vein. It pulses with memory and grief. Those who travel it without the bloodline, call the Hollowman. What is he? I asked. Ghost? Demon? Marin stared at the cracked crucifix hanging behind the pulpit. Closer to a curse, he murmured. A shadow that feeds. Every few years he claims someone, usually an outsider. That's how the town survives. Survives? What, you just let it happen? Marin's eyes flashed with something sharp and ancient. You think we want this? You think we built our lives around him? No. We're trapped. Just like you. He explained the old story, the real one, not the one the gas station clerk hints at or the one the kids whisper about after dark. The Hollowman was once a settler named Josiah Griggs, a devout man who came to this land in the early 1800s. He claimed to have visions, prophecies, and demanded the townsfolk build him a church in the woods. When they refused, he cursed the town, said the trees would swallow their children, the fog would smother their homes, and that no road out would hold for long. Then he vanished. Weeks later, his body was found, impaled on the steeple of his self-built chapel deep in the forest. The townsfolk tore it down. That was the first mistake, because the next week 2 children disappeared in the fog. Since then, the Hollowman had become something else, no longer a man but memory given shape, a being bound to the woods, called forth when roads are crossed and rules are broken. He feeds on identity, Marin said. The longer you stay, the more of yourself he eats. First your name, then your face, then your soul. I stood abruptly. There has to be a way out. You said it happens every few years, people survive. Some do, he said quietly, but not unchanged. I left the chapel as bells rang behind me, not for mass but as a warning. The fog was rolling back in. I ran down the hill, the haze wrapping around my ankles. I couldn't breathe right. Every sound was muffled like I was underwater. I stumbled past the diner, where a woman watched me through the blinds with a hollow stare. Her lips moved. I read them clearly. It's too late. By the time I reached my truck again, something was wrong. The door was open. And worse, someone had been inside. My glove box was hanging open. The dashboard was smeared with something dark, not blood but something older. And on the passenger seat sat a photograph. It was of me. But, not me now. Me at 5 years old. Standing in front of a birthday cake shaped like a fire truck. My parents behind me smiling. That photo had been in a box at my mom's house in Illinois. How did it get here? I turned the photo over. Something was written on the back in crude, looping handwriting. We start with what you forgot. I staggered back from the truck. My breath came in short gasps. I clutched my temples. My head was splitting with pressure, like something inside was digging. Memories flickered. My birthday. My mother's voice. A scar I had on my left arm. Gone. Gone. I couldn't remember how I got the scar, or what my mom's voice sounded like. I screamed, but it came out as a whisper. The fog was inside me now. I ran. Past the general store. Past the chapel. Into the woods. Branches clawed at my arms. My breath turned to mist in front of me. I thought if I found the place where the road used to be, maybe I could reverse it. Break the loop. But I wasn't alone. Ahead, just beyond the trees, I saw shapes moving. Not animals. Not people. They stood impossibly still. Their limbs hung at unnatural angles. Some were half naked, others draped in tattered clothing from decades past. One of them looked like an old mailman. Another wore a wedding dress. All of them had faces like mine. Like echoes of me, twisted and fading. I stumbled back into a clearing and fell to my knees. There he was. The Hollowman. Taller than the trees. Head bowed. His arms were fog itself, stretching out to touch the ground, the trees, the sky. He lifted his face and I saw nothing. A blank void. A face without features. Just a gaping, endless hole where identity used to be. Then he spoke, but not aloud. He spoke through my thoughts. Forget. 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 I screamed and ran blindly through the trees until I collapsed. When I awoke, I was back in the truck. The fog was thinner now, but still present. My photo was gone. Mallory stood outside the window. Her face was softer this time. Set. He showed you the mirrors, she said. The what? She looked up toward the hills. The people he's taken. Bits of them stay here. They become reflections. Reminders. Warnings. I don't want to be a warning, I whispered. She nodded. Then don't forget who you are. But that's the worst part. I already am. I couldn't remember my dad's name. Or where I went to school. I tried to write them down, but the pen slipped from my hand and the letters wouldn't come out right. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked off. Like a picture printed one too many times. Smudged. By the time I woke again, the sky had dimmed into something close to twilight, though the clock on my dashboard stubbornly read 11:03 a.m. Time meant nothing in Brackenridge Hollow. It existed here only as a ghost of memory, a suggestion rather than a certainty. I sat in the driver's seat, hands trembling against the wheel, and tried to remember something. Anything. My father's face. My childhood home. The name of my first pet. Nothing. There were holes in my head where memories used to live. Outside, the fog clung low to the streets like a creeping infection. Mallory was gone. The photo was gone. And worst of all, my name was starting to slip. I could still say it, but it felt like something I had borrowed, not something that belonged to me anymore. That's when I knew I couldn't stay. If I waited too long, I'd dissolve into this town like everyone else. A faded echo walking the streets. A warning etched in fog. A face without meaning. I had to find the old road. Back in the chapel, Father Marin was packing candles into a rusted lantern when I barged in. I need to leave, I told him. There's got to be a way out. He looked up slowly. You won't find it on your own. The Hollowman owns every path here. But there is one road he doesn't control. Not yet. I leaned forward, desperate. Then tell me, where is it? Marin hesitated. You've heard it already. The folk tale. About the girl who escaped. Everyone thinks it's just a story. Lucy Keller, I said, the name surfacing from the depths like a bubble rising through mud. He nodded. She was real. 17. Vanished into the woods with nothing but a map and a tin box. Everyone assumed the Hollowman took her. But a week later, her father found a journal buried beneath the roots of a lightning-struck tree. In it, she wrote of an old road, a path carved before the Hollowman was born, before the curse. And where does it lead? To the ridge, Marin whispered. The place where the town ends and memory begins. He gave me directions scrawled on yellowed paper. Landmarks. Symbols. Cryptic notes like turn only when the trees cry, and do not follow your shadow past the 3rd mile. I didn't care how strange it sounded. I was done being afraid. Fear was a leash and the Hollowman had yanked it long enough. I left the chapel with a canteen of water, a flashlight and the map in hand, and into the forest I went. The trees on the edge of town loomed tall and silent. Once I passed the crumbled stone marker shaped like a sheep's head, just as the map described, the air changed. Colder. So. Even the insects stopped singing. I counted every step. Marked the turns. Ignored the whispers in the branches. Around the 2nd mile the path narrowed. Brambles tugged at my sleeves. And then, from somewhere deeper in the woods, I heard crying. A child. Soft. Echoing. I froze. Don't follow your shadow past the 3rd mile. But this wasn't my shadow, was it? The cry came again. Closer now. I gritted my teeth and pushed forward, staying true to the path. I passed a fallen tree with carvings etched deep into its bark, eyes, over and over again. Watching. Then I saw it. A figure ahead. Small. Barefoot. A girl. She stood at the fork in the path, hair matted, skin gray and brittle like old paper. She looked up at me with empty eyes. Are you Lucy Keller? I asked, my voice hoarse. She opened her mouth but no words came, just a thick hiss, like wind through broken glass. Then she lifted one hand and pointed. Not at the trail. At me. And behind me the forest began to move. Twigs snapped. Branches groaned. The fog thickened, rolling in with unnatural speed. Something was chasing me. I bolted forward, heart hammering, lungs tearing at the air. The Hollowman was here. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I followed the map, turning right at the stone well, ducking beneath the twisted birch, crossing the dry stream bed. Behind me I heard my own name shouted from the woods, but it wasn't my voice saying it. It sounded like 1,000 overlapping imitations of me. Mocking. Hollow. Help me. Wait. I remember now. Each lie cut deeper than the last. Finally I reached it. A clearing ringed with bone-white trees. In the center, a ridge jutted out over a steep drop, a sheer cliff that looked out over nothing but black. And there, just beneath the roots of a tree struck by lightning long ago, I found it. The tin box. Inside, a weathered map, a scrap of hair ribbon and a page torn from a journal. The Hollowman cannot follow where he was never born. I didn't fully understand it. But I knew this place, this ridge, wasn't his. It was old. Untouched. Something deeper than his curse. I turned around, breath ragged. And there he stood. The Hollowman. Larger now. Taller than before. Towering above the trees like a living shadow stitched from broken memories. His head tilted to one side, watching. Waiting. I held up the journal page. You're not real here, I said. You don't belong. He stepped forward, and faltered. The ground beneath him rejected him. Roots recoiled. The mist pulled back like breath inhaled. He tried to scream but no sound came. And then just like that, he dissolved. Gone. The forest behind me sagged with a great breath. The air lightened. The trees whispered a different name. I stumbled back into town near dusk. The sky above had finally cleared, the fog lifting like a veil after a funeral. People were out on their porches again. But now they looked different. Lighter. Brighter. Mallory met me outside the store. You found it, she said. I nodded. He's gone. For now, she said softly. He always comes back. But I remember, I said. I remember who I am again. She smiled. Then you did more than survive. I left Brackenridge Hollow that night. The road had reappeared, twisting back through the forest like a snake reluctantly uncoiling. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I didn't need to, because I knew what I'd see. Myself. Whole again. When I finally crossed the county line, something strange happened. I cried. Not from fear. Not from pain. But from the overwhelming weight of freedom. My memories, fuzzy and bruised, had begun to return like birds after a long winter. My sister's laugh, the crooked smile of my first love, the chipped tile in my childhood kitchen. They came back to me in fragments, fragile as moth wings, and I clutched them close. But deep in my gut, I knew something wasn't right. The Hollowman was gone, but Brackenridge Hollow was not finished with me. I made it back to the city by midnight. The glowing skyline was a bomb, buzzing with normalcy. Gas stations. Crowded diners. A billboard for a local lawyer with a big fake smile. I parked outside my apartment complex and sat in the car for a long time. Everything looked exactly the same. And yet, I felt like an outsider. I was a man returning from a war no one believed in. The first sign came 3 nights later. I was lying in bed when I heard it. A tapping. 3 knocks, slow and steady, against my bedroom window. My apartment is on the 3rd floor. I sat up, heart stammering. It was just the wind, I told myself. Just a dream. But when I peeled back the curtain, the glass was smeared with black fingerprints. Not handprints. Not full palms. Just the tips of fingers. Pressed so hard they'd left tiny crescent cracks. The next day I started seeing people from the Hollow in the city. At first I thought it was coincidence. A man in a gray coat that looked like the baker. A girl at a bus stop with Mallory's same green eyes. But then I passed a glass storefront and saw my own reflection, and behind me stood someone else. Tall, dark, blurred like a smudge of soot that flickered before I turned. Everywhere I went I felt watched. The worst part? I couldn't be sure if it was all in my head. I tried to forget. Tried to bury Brackenridge with long work hours and louder music. But it didn't help, because something had followed me out. I realized it the day I opened my glove box to grab my registration, and found the tin box. The same one I had buried beneath the lightning-struck tree. It sat there, humming with a soft vibration as if it had a pulse. I didn't open it. I didn't need to, because deep down I knew what it meant. The Hollowman wasn't gone. He was waiting. That night I heard voices in my hallway. Whispers outside my apartment door. When I peered through the peephole, I saw something that made my blood turn to ice. A girl. 17. Her skin pale as frost. Her mouth sewn shut. She held a cardboard sign. We never leave. You never did. I didn't sleep. The walls of my apartment creaked like old floorboards. My lights flickered. The shadows in the corner grew darker than they should have been. By morning, my windows were fogged from the inside, each pane etched with symbols I remembered from the map, runes of protection, or warning. I needed answers. I needed to go back. I packed a bag. Left a note for my sister, though I doubted she'd understand. Then I drove. The GPS refused to find Brackenridge. The roads twisted unnaturally, rerouting me through abandoned mining towns and dead-end forests. Eventually I stopped using the map. I let instinct guide me. And after a full day of driving I saw it again. That sheep-shaped stone marker. The gate to the hollow. It was darker now. Colder. The fog thicker than ever. But I stepped forward anyway. Because this time I wasn't a lost delivery driver. I was someone who had escaped. And come back willingly. The town looked the same yet wrong. Buildings sagged. Trees bled sap like wounds. Windows stared like open eyes. No one moved through the streets. No Mallory. No Father Marin. Only one figure stood waiting for me in front of the chapel. Lucy Keller. She was older now. Maybe 30. Maybe older. She didn't speak, just handed me a torn page from her journal. The Hollowman doesn't kill, it read. He erases. The town exists in memory. Once you forget, you belong to him. She pointed to the graveyard behind the chapel. I followed. There, among crumbling tombstones and half-dug holes, I found it. My own headstone. My name. My birth year. And the inscription. He never left. I dropped to my knees. My hands trembled. I had never escaped. Not really. The city was part of the illusion. The memories I'd regained, just flickers of hope to keep me docile. This was the truth. I had been claimed. And there was no leaving now. Suddenly I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Purposeful. The wind fell silent. The trees held their breath. I turned, and saw the Hollowman rise from the mists. His face was my face. His body made of everything I'd forgotten. Old keys. Childhood drawings. A half-burnt birthday card. My high school jacket. He opened his mouth and whispered one word. Stay. I ran. Not away, but deeper. Into the woods. Into the pain. Back to the ridge. I could feel it again, somewhere beyond the dead pines and the blind crows. I had one chance left. Not to escape, but to remember everything. Only then could I break free. As I crossed the old stream bed, something caught my eye, scratched into the bark of a birch tree. A sentence. Etched by someone before me. Maybe Lucy. Maybe another lost soul. You aren't trapped here, unless you choose to forget. And with those words echoing through my mind, I stepped back into the clearing. Back to the place where it had all begun. The ridge was exactly as I remembered it, ringed by pale trees. Quiet. Still. Too still. The clearing pulsed with a kind of ancient silence, the kind that wraps itself around your bones and whispers, "You were always here." I stepped toward the gnarled tree where the tin box had once been buried. The roots were blackened now, curled like dead fingers. The earth below had split, revealing a hollow space. Inside it, my journal. Not Lucy Keller's. Mine. The pages were yellowed and scorched, but the handwriting was unmistakably mine. I flipped through slowly, dreading each word, yet unable to stop. Each entry detailed my descent. My first delivery to Brackenridge. Meeting Mallory. The chapel. The Hollowman. And then something else. An entry I never remembered writing. I chose to stay. I chose to forget. I begged him to let me forget. And now I want to remember. My legs gave out. I sat at the edge of the ridge, the wind hissing in my ears. I had been here before. Not once. Not twice. Hundreds of times. Each time I'd found the ridge, thought I'd broken free. Escaped the hollow. But each time, I chose to forget because remembering was worse. Because remembering meant facing what I'd done. I looked up and saw the Hollowman again. But this time he didn't advance. He just stood watching. His form was clearer now. Less shadow, more detail. And then I understood. He wasn't just made of memories. He was memory. Everything we discard. Everything we suppress. The truths we bury to survive. And Brackenridge Hollow wasn't a town. It was a graveyard of denial. A prison built by those too afraid to confront who they really were. The sky began to ripple. The fog thinned. And the ridge beneath me began to change. Roots slithered aside. The earth opened like a wound. And there, at the very heart of it, lay a body. My body. The same clothes I wore on the day of the delivery. The name tag on the chest. Kevin McAllister. I hadn't seen that name in weeks. My name. I stared at the corpse, gaunt, withered, lips parted in a silent scream. And I remembered. It wasn't a delivery. It was an escape. From myself. I was the reason for the accident. 3 years ago. Drunk. One wrong turn. A mother and daughter never made it home. And I ran. Drove for days. Landed in some nowhere place with a broken road and a town that shouldn't have existed. Brackenridge Hollow welcomed me. Promised peace. Promised forgetfulness. And I took it. I took it every time. But now, I stood again. Faced the Hollowman. And for the first time I didn't run. I know what I did, I said. And I don't want to forget any more. His head tilted. His arms rose. But I didn't move. The journal in my hands burned with a heat that wasn't physical. The pages curled, turned to ash. The wind screamed. The trees buckled. The Hollowman let out a soundless howl and shattered. Like glass hitting stone. His body broke apart into fragments of memory. Photos. Toys. Letters. Blood. Tears. Then silence. The sky cleared. Brackenridge Hollow began to fade. Not like smoke. Like memory erasing itself backward through time. The roads twisted and disappeared. The chapel crumbled to dust. Mallory smiled at me one last time from a window, then vanished. Lucy stood in the trees, eyes full of sadness and understanding. And then she too dissolved. Until only I remained. On the ridge. Alone. When I opened my eyes, I was back in my car. Parked outside the gas station from the beginning. Delivery still in the back. Sun rising. No fog. No town. And the radio was playing some old song I hadn't heard in years. For a second I questioned everything. Was it a dream? A breakdown? But then I saw it. A small burn mark on my hand shaped like an eye. And in my pocket the last page from the journal. The only one that survived. To move forward you must carry what you buried. I made the delivery that day. Then I called the family of the mother and daughter. Told them the truth. Every agonizing detail. I turned myself in. And for the first time in years I slept. Not just closed my eyes but really slept. Because Brackenridge Hollow may not show up on a map. But for some of us, it's the only place left to go when you try to bury the past. And it waits, patiently, until you remember. The end.